The Aurora Dawn shivered as it left the space station, gliding through the endless black. Kieran tightened his grip on the strap of his bag and took a deep breath. He was a mechanic from the mining colony of Zyre, and his life had always been simple: repair engines, fix ships, and hope for nothing more than a quiet journey home. But today something felt different, though he didn't know what. The cabin was crowded. Humans, aliens, and even a few small dragons were packed together. Kieran had an economy ticket, stuck in a narrow seat with a view of the engine humming through the hull. He sighed, expecting a boring flight. Then he noticed a disturbance near the first-class section. A massive dragon struggled to squeeze into the aisle. Its scales were dull from age and one wing was folded awkwardly. The dragon looked tired, old, and somehow noble. Kieran's eyes widened as he realized who it was. A veteran dragon, Thalric, a warrior whose name echoed in stories of galactic battles. His first instinct was shock. Dragons didn't usually travel in passenger ships and certainly not in first class. A flight attendant tried to help, but the section was full. The dragon lowered its head, and a low rumble of frustration vibrated through the cabin. Passengers shifted nervously, afraid of the sheer size and power of the creature. Kieran's heart raced. He didn't know dragons personally, but he had read enough to know that anger could be dangerous. Then the attendant asked for volunteers to give up their seats. Kieran hesitated. He had paid for economy and first class was always a dream. Still, looking at Thalric struggling, something in him shifted. This dragon had fought wars across galaxies, defended countless worlds, and now it needed help. Kieran's hands trembled as he stood. "I'll give him my seat," he said quietly. Passengers around him murmured in surprise. The attendant blinked, then guided Kieran forward. The dragon's eyes softened and a deep, almost thankful vibration filled the air. Thalric lowered his massive head as if acknowledging Kieran's choice. Kieran sat in the aisle, now without the comfort he had dreamed of. But watching the dragon settle into the seat, he felt an odd warmth, a strange pride. Something had shifted in the energy of the cabin. People whispered, unsure why a human would surrender his seat so easily. Kieran only smiled faintly. He didn't care about attention. Then the ship shuddered violently. Alarms blared, lights flickered, and the cabin shook like a leaf in a storm. Kieran grabbed the armrest as panic spread around him. The intercom crackled with a voice urging calm, but the sound barely reached above the hum of fear. Through the shaking, Kieran looked at Thalric. The dragon's eyes were calm, even sharp. There was understanding there, a recognition that this moment mattered more than comfort or fear. A distant vibration hummed through the hull. Kieran had never felt anything like it. The ship's sensors flared on the screens, an anomaly approaching, something fast, maybe bigger than the ship itself. Kieran's stomach turned. He had dealt with engine problems, but nothing like this. He was just a mechanic. What could he do against cosmic danger? Thalric lifted a wing slowly, brushing against the overhead panels. The vibration intensified, and Kieran felt a strange clarity in the dragon's presence. He realized, in a flash, that the dragon's experience, its life in battles and survival, was somehow communicating with him. The warmth he had felt before now turned into focus, an unspoken message: "You are not useless." The ship rocked again, more violently this time. Kieran held tight, but he couldn't help feeling drawn to the dragon. Without thinking, he stood. "I can help," he said aloud, though he didn't know how. Thalric turned his head slightly as if approving. Kieran's hands shook, but he walked toward the first-class cabin, eyes scanning for what needed repair. It was then he noticed a small crack forming along one of the outer hull panels. Thin but dangerous. He cursed under his breath. The ship's maintenance systems were detecting it, but they weren't fast enough. Kieran grabbed the portable toolkit he always carried and stepped toward the crack. Every passenger stared, some frightened, some curious. Kieran didn't care. He touched the hull, feeling the vibrations of the ship, the pulse of the engines. Thalric shifted beside him, low and steady, and Kieran realized that the dragon's presence gave him confidence he had never known. The alien and human passengers seemed to sense it too. Whispers of human courage floated through the cabin. Kieran worked quickly, improvising with tools meant for minor repairs. He patched panels, rerouted small energy lines, and reinforced weak joints. The anomaly outside drew closer, and Kieran's hands moved faster. His mind focused entirely on the task, every nerve alert. The passengers watched, some silently cheering, others wide-eyed at the strange alliance forming between man and dragon. Thalric remained calm, wings partially shielding Kieran and the weak parts of the hull. Kieran realized something incredible. The dragon was guiding him, not with words, but with subtle vibrations, movements, and presence. He followed instinctively, understanding that his actions could mean life or death. Finally, after what felt like hours but was only minutes, the crack held. Kieran stepped back, chest heaving, eyes wet with adrenaline and relief. Thalric lowered his head to look at him, and for the first time, Kieran felt a bond stronger than anything he had known. The dragon, veteran of countless wars, had trusted him in this moment. The alarm quieted, though the anomaly was still out there, moving closer, unseen. Kieran sat back, exhausted, yet filled with a strange, quiet pride. He had done what seemed impossible. He had stood with a dragon, faced fear, and acted when others could not. And in that moment he realized that his life, simple and quiet as it had been, was about to change forever. Passengers whispered, crew watched in awe, and Thalric's eyes met his. There was no need for words. Kieran understood that a simple choice, a first-class seat, had led him into something much bigger than himself. The universe, it seemed, had noticed, and the journey had only just begun. The ship had steadied slightly, but the tension in the cabin was thick. Kieran wiped the sweat from his forehead, feeling the vibrations from the engines through his hands. Thalric, the veteran dragon, sat beside him, wings partially folded, eyes scanning the viewscreen as if reading the stars themselves. Kieran had never seen anything like it. The dragon's presence was calming yet electrifying, a mix of raw power and careful control that made Kieran aware of how small he truly was, and how much he could learn. "You did well," Thalric said, though not in words. The vibration in Kieran's mind was soft but clear, almost like a whisper. Kieran froze for a moment, realizing that this dragon could communicate directly with him, in a way humans couldn't normally understand. It was not frightening but strange, and he had to focus to understand the subtle patterns of thought and emotion flowing from Thalric. Kieran nodded, uncertain what to say. I just did what I could," he replied. The dragon's eyes softened. Kieran felt pride swell in his chest, but also a new fear. He had no idea what might come next. The anomaly that had shaken the ship earlier was still approaching, though the sensors could not identify it clearly. Kieran leaned over the engine panels, checking systems and recalibrating power flows as best he could. Thalric shifted closer, a protective shadow over the human's small form. Even with the dragon's wings partially extended, Kieran could feel the hum of energy and experience flowing from him, almost as if Thalric were lending strength to his hands. Hours, or maybe minutes, passed, the sensation of time warped by fear and focus. Kieran began to understand that the dragon had fought wars, traveled through storms of plasma and fire, survived ambushes from alien fleets. The dragon's mind was a library of survival. Each subtle vibration that reached Kieran carried lessons in patience, timing, and courage. Kieran felt his own confidence growing. He was no longer just a mechanic. He was part of a team, even if the other member was a legendary dragon. Suddenly, a loud alarm shattered the fragile calm. Sensors picked up movement outside the hull, tiny shapes swarming fast, moving like coordinated shadows. Kieran recognized the pattern immediately: scavenger drones, the kind that stripped ships of power cores. He froze, thinking of the passengers around him. Most had no weapons, no protection. Panic could spread fast. "Stay calm," he said aloud, though he didn't know if anyone could hear over the alarm. Thalric's head turned, eyes glowing faintly, scanning the shadows outside the thick windows. A low rumble echoed through the cabin. Warning or preparation, Kieran couldn't tell. Then the dragon's mind reached into his, steadying him. "You can help," the vibration said. "Your hands, your mind, they are needed." Kieran's heart pounded. He had never fought before. His skills were with engines, tools, and repairs, not battles. Yet, standing beside Thalric, he felt a surge of clarity. The dragon was not just a companion. He was a mentor, guiding instinct and thought in ways Kieran never imagined. Kieran turned back to the engine panels and emergency systems, his mind racing to create defenses from whatever the ship carried. He grabbed spare energy conduits and mechanical tools, improvising. Thalric's massive wings brushed lightly over Kieran, directing his focus toward the weak points in the hull. The dragon's presence was like a second set of senses, noticing dangers Kieran could not see. Together they worked as one. Kieran rigged small power redirections and reinforced hull points, while Thalric used subtle movements to adjust energy shields. The alien drones outside slowed, unsure how to breach a system so well protected. Passengers began to notice. Eyes widened as the human and dragon moved in synchrony, neither commanding the other, yet fully aware of the same goal. Whispers spread. "The human is helping the dragon," someone said. "Look at them. They're like a team." Kieran felt a spark of pride, but it was deeper than that. This was not just pride, it was connection. The human and dragon bond went beyond species. It was trust, mutual respect, and something neither word nor thought could fully capture. Time moved strangely. Kieran's hands burned from rerouting energy, and sweat dripped down his face, but the dragon never faltered. Thauric's eyes never left the sensors, reading movements that Kieran could barely perceive. At one point, the dragon shifted, nudging a control panel with a claw. Kieran realized that every small action he took had been guided, almost choreographed by Thauric's subtle cues. The realization hit him. Dragons had knowledge humans could never gain on their own, and now that knowledge was flowing to him. The drones attacked again, more aggressively this time, slamming against the hull. Kieran improvised energy pulses, sending shocks through the ship's outer frame. Sparks flew, lights flickered, and the cabin shook, but the intruders slowed. Thauric roared, a deep, resonating sound that rattled the walls and even vibrated in Kieran's chest. The drones faltered under the combined force of human ingenuity and dragon strength. For a moment, everything was still. Kieran sat back on a reinforced panel, breathing hard. Thauric's head hovered over him, wings folding slightly, eyes warm but alert. The bond between them had solidified. Kieran felt it clearly now. Dragons were not just creatures of legend, they were guardians, wise and powerful beyond imagination. And humans, even small and fragile, could stand alongside them if they had courage, intelligence, and trust. "Thank you," Kieran whispered, unsure if the dragon would hear in words. Thauric's mind reached him again, calm and approving. Kieran smiled faintly, exhausted but exhilarated. He had never felt so alive. Outside, the anomaly continued to move in the distance, a shadow against the stars. But inside, Kieran and Thauric were no longer just passenger and legendary warrior. They were a team, bonded in ways neither fully understood, ready for whatever the galaxy would throw at them next. And in that moment, Kieran knew one thing with certainty. Life would never be simple again, but it would be extraordinary. The cabin trembled again, harder this time. Kieran clutched the edge of the console, feeling the vibrations travel through his arms and chest. Outside the hull, tiny shapes moved fast, too fast to be natural. Kieran squinted at the sensors, scavenger drones. They were small, but there were hundreds of them, swarming like metallic insects, drawn to the ship's energy. The passengers panicked, screaming and pressing against the walls. Kieran's heart pounded. He had faced engine malfunctions, but this was something else. Thauric's eyes glowed faintly as he rose to his feet. His wings stretched wide, brushing the cabin ceiling, and a low, resonant hum filled the air. Kieran felt it in his chest, a vibration that steadied his nerves and sharpened his focus. The dragon's presence was more than comforting, it was commanding. Kieran realized then that this was no ordinary flight. He had been pulled into a fight for survival. The first drone slammed against the outer hull, sending sparks flying across the window panels. Kieran rushed to the emergency controls, flipping switches and redirecting power to the shields. The ship groaned under the attack, lights flickering with each hit. Passengers screamed, but Kieran ignored them, focused on keeping the ship alive. Thauric moved beside him, using massive claws to tap control panels and guide energy through systems that Kieran barely understood. The dragon's movements were precise, like a general commanding troops. Kieran began to follow instinct, doing what the dragon suggested with subtle gestures and vibrations. He redirected conduits, recalibrated shields, and even rigged small pulse emitters to disrupt the drone's sensors. It was dangerous work. Sparks flew, and the air smelled of ozone and burning circuits. Kieran's hands shook, but Thauric's steady presence made him fearless. Each time a drone slammed against the hull, Kieran instinctively triggered the pulses, watching as tiny sparks burst across their metallic bodies, causing them to retreat just enough to avoid breaching the ship. The passengers stared, wide-eyed. Some whispered about the courage of the human, others about the sheer power of the dragon. Kieran ignored the attention. He had no time for it. Every second counted. The drones swarmed faster, coordinating their strikes. Kieran realized they were not just machines, they were programmed hunters, designed to dismantle ships quickly. If they succeeded, everyone aboard would die. Thauric roared, a deep vibration that rattled the hull, and Kieran felt his own heartbeat sync with the rhythm. The dragon moved with him, guiding, teaching, protecting. Kieran realized something he had never understood before. Dragons were not just strong, they were wise. Their centuries of survival gave them knowledge humans could never gain alone. And now that knowledge was flowing to him. Kieran worked faster. He rigged mechanical traps from the cabin tools, placing energy conduits to redirect the drone's attacks. Thalric used wings and claws to push emergency systems into place, shield weaker parts of the ship, and even dislodge drones that got too close. They moved as one, human and dragon, creating a defense that seemed impossible. A sudden hit knocked Kieran to the floor. Sparks flew from the control panel beside him. Pain shot through his shoulder, but he pushed himself up. Thalric's massive body shielded him from the worst of the impact. Kieran's vision blurred, but he forced himself to focus. Improvisation was all he had. He remembered small tricks from engine repair, redirecting power, rerouting circuits, using kinetic energy to create shocks. He adapted them to this fight. The drones faltered for a moment, unsure how to respond to the sudden barrage of energy pulses. Kieran saw an opening. He directed a small surge through the hull, sending a wave of energy that knocked several drones off course. Thalric followed immediately, swinging a wing to send another wave, dislodging more. The combined effort was working. They were turning the tide. Kieran noticed a panel flickering dangerously. It was the ship's main energy core. If it went down, everything would fail. Sweat poured down his face as he crawled toward it, tools clutched tightly. Thalric moved close, wrapping a wing around him to shield him from the nearest drones. Kieran worked quickly, reconnecting conduits, stabilizing the core, improvising in ways that would have seemed impossible minutes before. The cabin shook violently again. A drone slammed directly into the floor, bouncing toward the human passengers. Kieran reacted instinctively, sending a pulse through the nearest panel. The drone sparked, stopped, then fell limp. Another slammed against Thalric's wing, but the dragon barely flinched. Kieran watched in awe. He had thought dragons were creatures of legend, but now he understood. They were legends because they survived everything. Minutes, or maybe hours, passed in a blur of sparks, alarms, and humming energy. Kieran's hands were raw, his arms ached, but the drones were breaking apart, retreating under the combined force of human ingenuity and dragon power. Thalric's roar echoed through the cabin, sending the final wave of drones spinning into space. Silence followed, broken only by the hum of the engines and the occasional clatter of tools. Kieran collapsed to the floor, chest heaving. He looked up at Thalric, who lowered his head, eyes glowing faintly. There was no need for words. The dragon's presence conveyed everything: approval, gratitude, understanding. Kieran smiled weakly, exhausted but alive. He had never imagined that a simple mechanic could stand alongside a legendary dragon and make a difference. Around them, passengers slowly began to calm. Whispers filled the cabin, humans talking about courage, dragons talking about trust. Kieran realized something incredible. Humans could rise to challenges when given the chance, and dragons could recognize that potential. They were allies, bound by something greater than species, something deeper than words. Outside, the stars stretched endlessly, calm again for the moment. But Kieran knew the galaxy was full of threats, strange dangers lurking in the void. And yet, for the first time, he didn't feel small. He had learned that courage and ingenuity mattered as much as strength. He had survived the swarm, worked with a dragon, and changed the outcome of a battle he never expected to face. Kieran sat back, wiping his face, and felt the bond with Thalric deepen. The veteran dragon had not only guided him but taught him something no classroom or manual ever could. Humans could be heroes not in legend or story but in the real, cold expanse of space. And perhaps, he thought with a small smile, this was only the beginning. The ship shook violently, harder than ever before. Kieran stumbled, gripping the edge of the console as alarms blared through the cabin. The drones were gone, but the Aurora Dawn had taken damage. Sparks rained from the ceiling, and the main energy core glowed red, warning of imminent failure. Kieran's stomach twisted. If the core went, the ship would explode. Everyone, humans, small dragons, even Thalric, could die. Thalric's massive wings stretched over the cabin, protecting the passengers from falling debris. His eyes glowed faintly, and Kieran felt the same calming vibration in his chest that had guided him through the fight with the drones. But this time the sense of urgency was stronger. The dragon's presence told him clearly, something had to be done now. Kieran ran toward the engine room. Every step was dangerous. Sparks fell, panels split open, and the air smelled of burning circuits. He reached the core controls and froze. The core was unstable, energy leaking in rapid pulses. The automated systems tried to compensate, but they were failing. Kieran realized there was no time for procedure. He had to act manually. Thalric stepped behind him, wings creating a protective barrier against debris and radiation. The dragon's low hum filled Kieran's mind with courage. "I can do this," he whispered. Thalric's eyes met his, approving. Kieran's hands shook, but he plunged them into the control panel, rerouting conduits, reconnecting circuits, and calibrating energy flows. Every movement had to be precise. A single mistake could end everything. The ship rocked violently again. A sharp pain shot through Kieran's shoulder as a loose panel scraped him. He ignored it, focusing on stabilizing the reactor. His hands were scorched, his clothes singed, but the human mind is stubborn, and his will burned brighter than the pain. Thaurik moved closer, tapping panels with claws, redirecting energy through the hull to support Kieran's adjustments. Kieran realized that the dragon was doing more than shielding him, it was enhancing his work. Every subtle movement of Thaurik's claws and wings transmitted guidance that Kieran felt deep inside, instinctively knowing which circuit to adjust next. Suddenly, a surge of energy shot from the core. Sparks flew and Kieran was thrown against a wall. Pain exploded through his side, but he gritted his teeth and crawled back to the console. The core was on the verge of meltdown. Time was slipping away. Now or never, Kieran muttered. He reached for the main stabilizer rods, heavy conduits that no human was meant to touch directly. The metal burned, but he forced them into place, connecting the conduits with wires and clamps. Thaurik pressed a wing against the core shielding, amplifying the energy distribution. Together, human and dragon became a single unit, balancing the unstable power with strength, skill, and trust. The energy spike intensified. The ship groaned and alarms blared louder. Kieran's vision blurred from exhaustion, pain, and heat, but he focused on the rhythm of the reactor. The vibrations in his chest, sent from Thaurik, guided his hands. He matched the dragon's pulse with the energy, weaving a delicate balance between chaos and stability. Minutes felt like hours. Sweat poured down his face, mixing with grime and sparks. He could hear the passengers screaming, but their voices seemed distant, almost unimportant. Kieran knew the ship's survival depended on him and the dragon. He could not fail. A final surge hit. Kieran gritted his teeth, forcing the last stabilizer into place. The energy pulsed through the conduits and slowly the core stopped fluctuating. Red warning lights faded to steady green. The hum of the engines returned to normal. Kieran collapsed, gasping, his body burned and bruised. Thaurik's massive head lowered beside him. The dragon's eyes glowed softly, and the vibration of approval filled Kieran's chest. He smiled weakly, exhausted beyond measure. The unthinkable had happened. He had faced near death, stood against the heart of a ship ready to explode, and survived, with the guidance of a dragon. Around them, the cabin was in chaos but slowly settling. Passengers emerged from hiding, looking at Kieran and Thaurik with awe. They whispered about the courage of the human mechanic and the power of the veteran dragon. Some cried quietly, others shook their heads in disbelief. Kieran barely heard them. His focus had been survival, not recognition. Kieran pushed himself to his knees and looked at Thaurik. "We did it," he whispered. The dragon's low rumble vibrated like laughter and pride. Kieran realized then that they were more than allies. They were partners, linked in a way that transcended words or species. As the crew assessed damage, Kieran noticed a subtle shift in the passengers' energy. They were no longer fearful but inspired. Even humans who had doubted themselves before now looked at him with respect. Kieran had shown them that courage and intelligence could change fate, even against impossible odds. The stars outside were calm, cold, and endless, but inside, Kieran felt warmth. He had survived the unthinkable, learned to trust a being far greater than himself, and discovered that human skill, paired with courage and guidance, could stand against forces that seemed unstoppable. Thaurik lowered his wings slightly, still protective, still alert. Kieran leaned back against the console, aching, burned, and exhausted, but alive. He realized something crucial. Survival was not just about strength. It was about trust, teamwork, and the willingness to act when others froze in fear. Kieran looked at the dragon and nodded faintly. Thaurik responded with a soft vibration that Kieran now understood perfectly. Approval, respect, and recognition. They had faced death together and both had survived stronger than before. The passengers began to whisper, some approaching cautiously to look at the human and the dragon. Kieran realized that this moment, terrifying and exhausting as it had been, had changed him. No longer just a mechanic, he was now a hero in the eyes of those who witnessed the unthinkable. Outside, the void of space stretched endlessly, silent and cold. Inside, Kieran and Thaurik sat together, recovering from a fight that seemed impossible to survive. And in that quiet moment, Kieran understood that life would never be the same. He had faced the unthinkable and lived, not just because of his own courage, but because he had trusted a dragon, and the dragon had trusted him. And in that realization, Kieran felt ready for whatever the galaxy would throw at him next. The Aurora Dawn drifted silently through space, the hum of its engines steady now. Kieran sat on the floor of the engine room, exhausted but alive, his clothes scorched and hands blackened with soot. Thalric hovered nearby, wings folding slowly, eyes scanning the cabin and the stars beyond. The veteran dragon exhaled a soft, steady rumble that vibrated through Kieran's chest. He smiled faintly, a quiet pride filling him despite the pain. They had survived. Word spread quickly through the ship. Passengers whispered about the human who had risked his life to save them and the veteran dragon who had fought alongside him. Crew members came to look, their faces full of awe. Kieran noticed small gestures, nods of respect, murmured praise, even the shy smiles of children who had hidden behind seats during the attacks. None of it mattered to him as much as one thing. He had stood with a dragon, and together they had faced the impossible. Thalric lowered his head toward him. The vibration in Kieran's chest told him that the dragon approved. It was more than approval, it was recognition. Humans, small as they might seem in the universe, could rise to challenges, could act with courage and cleverness when it mattered most. Kieran had proven that today. The passengers began to settle, some carefully approaching to offer thanks or help. Kieran waved weakly, still too tired to speak, but his mind was already processing what had happened. He realized that this was more than just surviving a crisis, it was a turning point. Humans and dragons, once separated by fear and distance, could work together. They could stand as equals in moments that truly mattered. Thalric nudged Kieran gently with a claw, and he understood the dragon was ready to move again. They walked together toward the observation deck, where the stars stretched endlessly. Kieran had never felt the galaxy so vast and alive. The void, silent and cold, had tested him, but he had discovered something inside himself he didn't know existed. Bravery, quick thinking, and a bond that defied species. As they looked out at the stars, Thalric lowered his wings, signaling calm. Kieran noticed that other dragons, distant but visible in the void, had recognized Thalric's signal. Small lights and shapes moved in formation as if answering a call. Kieran's eyes widened. The veteran dragon had allies out there, and they were aware of what had happened on the Aurora Dawn. A crew member approached, bowing slightly. "Sir, the passengers are asking who you are. They want to know your name," she said, looking between Kieran and Thalric. Kieran hesitated, then shrugged. "I'm just a mechanic," he said softly. But Thalric rumbled beside him, and Kieran felt a strange surge of pride. In that moment he was more than a mechanic. He was someone who had acted when it mattered most. In the coming hours, the ship's systems were repaired, mostly thanks to Kieran's quick improvisation and Thalric's guidance. The passengers helped where they could, inspired by the courage and teamwork they had witnessed. Kieran worked quietly, letting others take the credit if they wished. For him, the reward was knowing that he had proven something. Humans were capable of more than most believed. When repairs were complete, Thalric nudged Kieran toward the exit. They walked through the cabin together. Passengers stepped aside, some bowing slightly, others simply staring. Kieran realized that this journey had changed more than just the ship's course. It had changed perceptions not just of him, but of what humans could do in the galaxy. As they reached the observation deck, Kieran looked out at the stars once more. Thalric's presence beside him was steady and reassuring. Kieran understood then that this was not the end of their story, it was the beginning. Humans and dragons could work together. They could face dangers that alone they could never hope to survive. And maybe, just maybe, humans could be more than what anyone thought, even legends in their own right. A distant shimmer appeared in the darkness, a fleet of dragons moving through the void, silent and majestic. Thalric shifted his wings slightly, a signal that Kieran now recognized. The dragons had accepted him, a human, as part of their world. Kieran's heart surged. He had crossed a threshold not through strength or weapon, but through courage, ingenuity, and trust. He turned to Thalric, who rumbled softly, eyes warm. Kieran smiled, feeling the bond between them stronger than ever. He knew that the galaxy was vast, full of dangers and wonders alike, but he no longer felt small. Humans had a place in this universe, not beneath dragons but beside them. He had survived the impossible, and now he could help shape the future. The stars stretched endlessly, calm again after the chaos, but Kieran felt something inside him ignite, a determination, a sense of purpose. The galaxy was waiting, filled with challenges, mysteries, and adventures. And he would face them, not alone, but with allies who saw humans as equals. The passengers watched quietly as Kieran and Thalric moved to the front of the observation deck. Some whispered, some simply stared in awe. Kieran realized they had witnessed more than survival. They had seen a human rise to meet the impossible and stand as a partner to a dragon. The story of today would travel, he knew, across colonies, ships, and worlds, inspiring others to believe in human courage. Kieran leaned against the observation window, feeling the hum of the ship beneath him. Thaurik shifted beside him, and Kieran understood the message clearly. The galaxy had changed for humans. The bond he shared with the veteran dragon was proof. Humans were no longer just small creatures in a vast universe. They could be heroes, partners, and even legends if they were willing to act. And in that quiet, infinite moment, Kieran felt ready. Ready for the adventures to come, ready to face whatever dangers the stars held, and ready to stand beside dragons as a new era began. The universe was no longer distant or indifferent. It was alive, vast, and waiting. And for the first time, a simple human mechanic understood that he had a place in it. A place that mattered, a place where courage, intelligence, and trust could change the course of worlds.